I think communication is essential when it comes to music
Yeah.
production if you're working as a freelancer.
Yeah. Especially if
Because
there's so many people involved in the project, I think it gets even harder.
yeah, you just have to be able to communicate really well, and you
Yeah.
have to be confident that like I say to lots of people, like I'm going to throw 20 ideas at you, and 19 of them are going to be terrible. And tell me the ones you don't like. Don't worry about offending me because
Yeah.
I have no emotional attachment to these things. Like we will get there much quicker if you tell me what you do and don't like.
Yeah.
I'm not going to take it personally. I won't be offended.
Yeah.
It's just I need to figure out what it is you want so I can give that to you. Um, that's yeah, that's the way I view these projects. That type of thing doesn't scare me, no, not at all.
Welcome to the Musician Secrets podcast. Today, I have an amazing guest for you. He's actually a freelance platinum music producer that has done many things as like advertising for campaigns, like remixes. You have a project going on that's called 1,000 Beasts, which we'll talk about later why it's called that way. And you've also done the Dublin New Year's Festival for 2019 and 2020, and probably like 21 if there was COVID. But but everyone, please welcome Cian. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. How's it going?
Good. I'm excited because I usually don't really get nervous, but with this one I kind of am because I'm just so excited for you to be on the podcast because I've been following you on Instagram. I'm like, this dude is amazing. Like, hopefully, like I'll wait a little bit and just kind of see what he's doing, and then maybe if the podcast grows, he'll want to be on here. So thank you, really. I
No, it's
appreciate
my pleasure. Absolutely. Thanks for asking me.
it. For those that don't know who you are, just give us a walkthrough of, start at the very beginning if you want. What got you into music and into like all these amazing, well, it feels like you're doing everything as a producer, from like doing remixes to all these projects and like festivals and stuff like that. So who is Cian and where did it all start?
That's a great question. So, my name is Cian. I am Irish. I am from a place called Cork in
Okay.
Ireland, which for your German listeners, I think is the equivalent of Munich. It's like the second city, but it's a very proud second city in Ireland. We're incredibly proud, so much so that everybody else in Ireland takes the mickey out of us. And yeah, I'm a musician, so I'm probably most well known for my own project, my own freelance project, which is called 1,000 Beasts, which is where I collaborate with different singers. Well, it started off where I collaborated with different singers on every release. Every release I put out, and yeah, and I also work as a freelance musician, a freelance music producer. So I'm like a session musician as well, and like a musical director and pianist and all sorts of things. And even during the pandemic, I actually started doing a little bit of lecturing. So it's all sorts of random things. But
Wow.
yeah, that's me. Yeah.
Yeah, so where did that journey start from? Were you always into music or was it like,
Yeah, I think my mother was a music teacher. Um,
okay.
and I think I've been learning piano since I've been 4 or 5. I've been getting piano lessons. So piano is my first like
Wow.
language, I suppose. And yeah, I did all my grades. We have a grade system here, and I did all my grades and I learned piano the whole way through. And then about the age of maybe 13 or 14, I started learning guitar. And it just started, it kind of went from there. I got into a few bands and I was playing with stuff. And then it came to the time of my leaving cert here, which is kind of the equivalent of your A levels or your, the kind of when you get to the end of school and you're deciding what to do when you get to college. And there's a few different options. And I never really thought about it. I was always very good at music, like in school. Never really thought about it, and I could have gone for like a proper degree, but I think my mom just was like, you may as well go for music. And yeah, and that was it. I just did a degree. We've a really good music college in Cork called the Cork School of Music, which is I'm biased, but it's probably the best one in Ireland, which was very handy. And it's the largest order of Steinway pianos ever ordered anywhere on the planet. It was to the School of Music in Cork. So I think there was something
No
like
way.
60 or 70 Steinway grand pianos were ordered when the place was built,
Yeah.
and it was just open when I was there. And yeah, I went there and it was amazing. It was a degree in music, so it was actually mainly classical music.
Mhm.
But I went in there. I always kind of wanted to be a producer. My main interest was in making music, like producing it. Even though I loved performing, but making music was what I really wanted to do. So I kind of went in there a bit niche. I played piano. I was
Yeah.
really good at kind of harmony and orchestration and all the classical kind of aspects of that regard. But I had a real focus on electronic music production or producing using like digital means, like using laptops and Ableton and whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And nobody else was really doing that at that time. I'm actually really old. I'm nearly 30. I look like I'm about 12, but I'm
No
30 at the
way. Yeah, I
yeah.
would have
So
never guessed.
yeah, so I started that degree in 2010, and back then it's funny, like in 2010 YouTube was obviously a thing, but I don't think the kind of educational side of YouTube was a thing. There
Mm,
wasn't as many resources when it comes to like learning how to produce, or like I'm so jealous now. If I was like 18 or 19 now and I had stuff like Splice and I
yeah.
had like YouTube tutorials and all these things,
Mm,
like I would know so much so quickly. Back then it was all a bit new and I kind of had to figure it all out, and I was kind of the first one in the college to do that, but thankfully I had two or three lecturers in there who just enabled me to do it. And yeah, I went on and did that for 3 or 4 years, and then at the end of it I was like, hey, I really want to like zone in on like music production and stuff.
yeah.
I decided to go to London and I did a master's in audio production in the University of Westminster. And the moment I flew on the plane to England, I started getting my first jobs in Ireland as a freelance music like player. So then I had to fly back to Ireland every like 2 or 3 weeks to do gigs. So I was working as like a musical director on a TV program here called The Voice, and then I was working as like started playing with our national orchestra as like I used to do the kind of synths and keyboard bits if we did any kind of like any funky gigs or anything like that. And that's where the career started. And yeah, from there, then that was maybe 2014, 2015.
Yeah.
I just started falling in with loads of different session musicians and, or sorry, loads of different music artists. And I basically toured the world for 3 or 4 years as a pianist and as a musical director. So from really random acts, from people who like huge Irish American acts like Celtic Thunder or Damien McGinty, who was on Glee, stuff, and very famous kind of Irish acts like the Blizzards, for instance.
Yeah.
Loads of stuff for Jenny Green, who's here in Ireland, and then I would have gone as far as field as like Australia. I did a few tours in Germany, and yeah, that was it. And then, but the whole time I was producing, my interest, or the whole time I was touring and being a session musician, being a pianist, my main interest was in learning how to produce.
Uh,
And I was always be on like the back of the tour bus with my laptop, like
yeah.
producing ideas and stuff. And that's kind of where I suppose I used that time to kind of develop and learn, I think.
So it was like a on the side kind of thing that you were like learning every like the production side.
Yeah, I think like 2014, 2015, I kind of learned in a bubble in the sense that like there wasn't, I had to teach it to myself, all of it. There wasn't the resources there that there were now. As I progress, I keep finding more and more tools that make it easier to learn. But like back then, I kind of had to teach myself how to
Yeah.
use a compressor and like how EQ worked and
Mm,
what the optimum loudness for something was, and like different file formats, and like just training my ears to hear like the difference between a good sounding kick drum and a terrible sounding kick drum, or all those things, and like learning creative choices, which I think come with time, and like your taste obviously evolves. But like even if I listen back to stuff that I worked on in 2016 or 2017, like a cringe, I'm like, oh, that's awful. And now you do, but you I feel like you always progress, you always get better. You get more confident, and you also relax. I'm much more relaxed now in producing. I'm much more confident in like the decisions I've made. But I had to teach myself in the sense that like YouTube tutorials and stuff became really big in my learning around like 2017, 2018. But
yeah.
before that, there wasn't really the resources. The only things that you could learn on YouTube was like how to make EDM or something like that. Like
Yeah.
like Avicii tutorials or whatever.
Now you can look up anything you want, like literally the
Anything.
stupidest of thing. Like, seriously, if I don't know how to do something, I'll type it into YouTube, and
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, the answer's like tons of tutorials for sure. Like, I feel like it's nowadays it's so much easier to be a air quote musician. Like, you can even like you don't even have to know an instrument anymore. Like, this is so like, just use Splice for example. Like, all the loops are in there, all the one shots or whatever you need. Like, if you know how to use a dot program or like whatever, even if you just use a MIDI controller, like the pads that you use all the time, from, is it Roland? Do you use Roland or you use a different
I use loads to anything I have that
anything,
works.
anything
Like
that can press a
everything.
button?
Yeah, I have the launch pad. So I have
Yeah,
the Novation launch pad. I have that
yeah.
down here. Hit
Elevation, yeah.
box.
I have
And
like
now
the mini one.
Yeah, that's what I have. And then I have the X Axiom, so I have like an M Audio. I have so many things. I have so much things. I have a Nord. I have all sorts of things I've picked up over the
Have
years. So there's loads.
everything. I just have
Yeah,
like the mini version and I'm already intimidated by that. I'm like, how do people even know what to press? So yeah, but I mean it's easy, like you said, like there's so many online courses out there and there's so many, YouTube tutorials and everything. And I mean that's kind of where I like the last 4 years kind of fell into. And so that's why I now created the members area that kind of outsources everything. Is like, okay, you want to be a producer, this is the best online course. You want to be a good singer songwriter, here's the best online course of the book or resources and whatnot. So I wish I had that when I started, because now it's the opposite. You're like flooded with information that you don't even know where to start, or one person has this opinion, the other one, oh no, that's stupid, you should be doing this. And it's like, wow, freak out moment,
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, so that's cool that you kind of like, figured it out what and like hung in there. Like I assume like your passion had to be like so big or so strong to like get through that, because I feel like a lot of people like they try and then they're like, oh, it's not for me, and then they like do something else, or they try it for a couple of months and then they're like, oh, it's too hard, it's not what I imagined it to be.
I think of myself as really I suppose I think of myself as really like pragmatic, or I think of it almost like engineering. I got asked in an interview before about like how I was so creative or something, and it's funny because I actually don't think I'm very creative, which is some people might be like, "What?" But to me, it's all about patterns and it's technique, and it's the same thing as like taking a piece of wood and just sculpting from it.
Yeah.
And I know that's probably creative, but it's also a technique. So like I'm making something rather than it's making something actually is what and maybe that is the definition of creative, but I don't know. To me it's kind of there's a process, and it's the comfort in the process, and like developing a process and creating something from that process is what it is to me in all aspects of music, I think.
Mm.
Like if I'm listening, like as a session musician, if I'm working for someone else, if I'm playing piano for someone else, I'll break it down very quickly in my head. Like I'll just have a map. It'll be like a very logical map of the track, but I'll get that down and very quickly the moment I hear it. And yeah, then I have it. After that, then it's just compartmentalized, and then you've got certain variations you can do depending on like what the style of the track is or the tempo of the track is. But you've got like a chord map in your head, and that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I think systems are important. I mean, I'm reading a book. It's called Atomic Habits by James Clear. I think it's a book that everyone's read or is reading or whatnot. And I'm like, oh, it's just hyped up and blah blah. And now I'm reading it, and he's big on systems. He's like, goals give you a direction, but systems actually, get you there consistently, right? It's like cleaning a room is a goal, but that doesn't change you as a person of being clean and keeping the room clean. Like if you have a system in place, it will continuously keep your room clean, right? And I think that's the same as musicians. We have this goal of, I want, I don't know, 10,000 streams on Spotify or something. But if you have a system in place, it will, get you that consistently, or it's just different. And I think that's that's what I've been noticing, that like successful musicians or people in general do. You have systems in place, and so I thought that was very interesting that you brought that up.
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of for your sanity as well. Like, I think when you're starting out, you're very I'm not very I don't really care that much about the other side. Like, I probably should care about it more. I kind of care more about the creating process, and I make the stuff, and then kind of comes to the release, and I don't really kind of know what to do. Sometimes I'm like, God, what do I do here? I'm more interested in just making it, and then once it's
Yeah.
out, it's out. Being honest, I think music has changed so much. Like I've been kind of coming up with this theory in the past couple of months, in particular, like with Thousand Beasts, for instance.
Yeah.
Um, with Thousand Beasts, I did a remix for a girl called Elaine Malone from Cork here. Like maybe that came out in like November or something, and I dropped my first EP last summer on a French label called Unity, and I started Thousand Beasts because I was working with different publishers as a producer and as a songwriter, and I was working with loads of different publishers in kind of 2016, 2017, and I was coming across all this really good talent in Ireland and some in London too, who were brilliant vocalists, but like they didn't have a project, or they mightn't have like the money, just be starting out or whatever. And I wanted to be a producer, and I was like trying to figure out how do I become a producer, and I was like, do I email like studios or what? And I decided probably the best thing I could do is just create an actual portfolio of tracks, and that's what 1000 Beasts was at the start. It was like me producing songs with different people on every release, and they were the beasts, so that's why it's 1000 Beasts, and that was the concept. And it started off where I was making like kind of electro pop stuff. The problem with it at the start was it all depended who I was collaborating with. So one
Yep.
of the first tracks I put out did really well. Kind of by accident, it was with a girl called Janet Rogan, who's amazing. She's a Dublin singer, and like she did really well on the X Factor in England, and it was a real pop kind of electro pop song. It did really well. It was brilliant.
Yeah.
But it probably did too well because it kind of gave me the illusion that like, oh, maybe this is going to work out. So I
Yeah.
kind of blindly kind of stumbled on and kept putting out a few more songs. And then I kind of had to turn around at the end of just before the pandemic, kind of middle of 2019, and I was kind of like, what am I doing here? Because I had 6 or 7 songs out, but they were all kind of different genres. I didn't feel like there was anything consistent, so I couldn't kind of pull a live show together. I don't sing, so it was like, hang on, and I got new management at that time, and I kind of had to go, what is it I want to do here, and what direction do I want to take 1000 Beasts in? And around that time, then around the kind of autumn winter 2019, just before the coronavirus struck, I kind of put the head down and I changed the way I produce music. So before I would go into a room with someone with nothing, just my laptop, and I'd normally like sit down at the piano, kind of get some beats on the go and take it from there. But
Yeah.
I always found that if I did that, I ended up writing something that was very much in the style of the singer, because that's the type of person I am musically. I'll accommodate who I'm working with. Whereas I think when it came to the way I changed my process was I started coming up with instrumentals. So now I'd start producing like 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute instrumentals, and I'd call them vibes, and I'd put them up on a Spotify playlist or a SoundCloud playlist, sorry.
Yeah.
And then I just send that out to anybody I wanted to work with. So I'd get onto my management and I'd be like, I want to work with this person, send them these tracks or send them these tracks. And then if someone got back to me and was like, oh, I really like this vibe, I'm like, sweet, come up with a top line for it. Let's meet up. Let's work like that. And if not, and then I could send it to someone and they're like, oh, there's nothing here for me. I'm like, that's no worries. I'll hit you up in 6 months' time when I have some more stuff. There might be something that'll suit you. But that way I could guarantee that the sound of 1000 Beasts would be cohesive and that the tracks would be cohesive.
Yeah.
Because it was me with a top line on it, as opposed to like writing a song for it. The way I was doing it the other way was I was basically producing a track for other people and kind of putting them in a thing. So that's what I did, and I did that for the first EP, which came out last year, and that did super. Our big single off that was Tokyo. And
there's something in the way you move, I feel it now. Something that we shouldn't do, but all allow. Don't need a reason if I wanna wear the crown. There's something in the way, there's something in the way, there's something in the way you move, I feel it now.
that's like done super. We're over 500,000 streams at least on
a
it, and
different
it's been,
page, I think it's called, right? On a different page. The EP.
yeah, on a different page, which is one of the lyrics from one of the tracks. And yeah, it was super, and that was last summer. And coronavirus happened in March 2020, and we were planning on doing like loads of live shows because we built this amazing live set, and then coronavirus happened, so that all stopped. And I just wrote an album. I basically, within 3 or 4 months, I pulled together all the beats I had, all the different kind of ideas, got together with some collaborators, and at the end of the day I had 20 something, I had over 20 tracks. And the initial thought was, oh, we'll do this as the initial thought was that we do it as a kind of a 2 album or like 2 EPs or something. And I was like, nah, let's just put it all in 1 album. And I just cut some of the songs that didn't feel like they fitted on the album, and that's it. And now we're there. So the first track from that, the first one I released was in March 2021, and I've just been releasing them all year, and the full thing is going to come out next March. So that's the plan.
Yeah, so it's like in a year, well, not quite a year, but like,
yeah. So what are we at now? We're in September. Actually, it's funny because I had the thing finished from like November 2020, but then there was all the kind of the music side of business things. So we were trying to get a distribution deal for it, and like there was lots of people interested, but because music industry has become so numbers based now, there was a lot of interest, and they're like, oh, this is great, but the numbers aren't there. We're getting a lot of the numbers aren't there, yada yada yada. And I was kind of saying, let's just put it out. I don't care. I was like, just put out the song. I was like, I believed in like the music. I just think put the music out, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
We did that with the first track for you and I. Eventually, we put it out in March when we probably should have put it out like November, a couple of months before, but we put it out in March. And at the moment we put it out, it immediately, like within a week or something, had about 100,000 streams. So we were like, we've got loads of distribution offers, and since then
Wow.
we've so sometimes you can.
Just
Is it
follow
kind of
your
a
gut. Just, you know.
yeah? There's a saying, isn't there? Some people say like, what is it? Aim and or shoot first, then aim, as opposed to like aim and then shoot, isn't it? Just go and do it, and like you can figure it out along the way.
Mm.
And I am a perfectionist, so I'm always trying to make everything perfect. But sometimes I just have to stop and be like, just do it. You'll figure it out. You can't make it perfect before you get it going, you know.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's I have to tell myself that because I'm like, okay, don't wait until it's perfect because then I'll never finish. Because like I said, you're always growing, you're always learning. At least that's what I always strive for, right? Is for me, the worst thing someone could say is like, oh, you haven't changed a bit. Like if I would have met up with a like an old friend of mine after like 2 or 3 years and they're like, oh, you haven't changed a bit, I'd be like, being offended because I'm like, that meant I didn't grow as a person and or a musician or whatever that is. I don't want to be in the same place I was 5 years ago. So hopefully, like if I listen to my songs now that I wrote 2 years ago, I can cringe because I'm like, ooh, what did I do? Because that meant I grew, right? If I'd be like, oh yeah, cool, like then I haven't been growing. So now I think that's where a lot of musicians kind of get stuck in that balance between, okay, how long do I hold on to this and make it the best I can in this moment, but not too long to like make it perfect, which will never happen anyway. And then kind of it dies in the, they call it the, what is it? The the external hard drive graveyard, right? Like that's what they call it. Because you never release it. And so I think that's like a really cool example to be like, you know what? If we sit on this any longer, it's just gonna die on the hard drive, right? And what's the good of that? So just like let it go.
Absolutely, yeah, I totally agree. It's you've got to, yeah. There, I mean, there's merits to both. You have to like, I don't put out everything I do. There's some tracks I
Yeah.
do, and like I might finish them, and I'll be just like, it's not, because the way I think music has gone now. I think of Thousand Beasts kind of within the past maybe like 10, 11 months as a YouTube channel. Even though it's not a YouTube channel, I try and run it like a YouTube channel now. So
Yeah.
like, and that's my aim, where like we release music regularly and it's like a consistent vibe and it's a consistent kind of energy. And you can have differences within that. The next track I'm bringing out, I actually just announced it. The next track I'm bringing out on Friday is with a spoken word artist. So like
Nice.
it's a poem. It's an instrumental with a poem. Like it's not a song. And but it still falls under the umbrella, and it is a body of work. But I like to think of it in terms of, I think it's really important to think in terms of projects. So like be it an EP or an album or a mixtape, but then spread it out and like build a vision over a longer period, because someone might find you on the first track and then stick with you for the whole thing, or they might find you on the very last track. But the thing is, like, I'm releasing music now, and I know I'll release more music in 6 months' time, and someone might hear a track I've released in 6 months' time, and then they'll go and find my back catalog and be like, "Oh, I really like all this stuff," and then they become a fan. So that's kind of the way I think of it. And with like Spotify algorithms and stuff, I'm lucky. The remix I did for Elaine Malone, that you remix, when I put that out last November or whatever, it just took off on Spotify, and Spotify loved it. And every Monday, the algorithm just like keeps introducing it to new fans, and off the back of that, I have very good like discovery weekly. So now I know if I just put out a track, even if it doesn't do well at the start, it like will always keep reaching new fans, and I'll keep getting messages even weeks and months later from people being like, "Oh, I discovered the song. I really like the song," or whatever. So that's kind of the way I think it needs to be run anyway.
Yeah. No, it's cool because like music like that is evergreen, right? In marketing, we call it evergreen. You make it once, and then you can distribute it forever to everyone. Like that's like the ideal goal is, not have to remaking, like, remake it all the time. Like obviously later on you can make a remix out of that and kind of get the flow going again and stuff. But that's the cool thing about music going digital is you just put it out there and then it's evergreen, and everyone's like you said, like the key is consistency. And I know that because I'm really bad at it, and that's something I want to change. And it's in the making of changing that. But with any social media platform, with any like Google or YouTube or whatever it is, search engines, it's all about consistency. It's if you are there on a consistent basis, like they will push you further because you're bringing the attention to the people, to the listeners, to the fans, because they know you'll show up. It's not going to be like a one-time thing and then kind of thing. So yeah, I think consistency is like really
Yeah,
important, and
I
I
agree. The
know to
thing is, it
myself.
makes it hard to be where people find that hard. And this is an issue then because you get like the TikTok generation, okay? And you'll get like the TikTok. I work with as a session musician, I work with an Irish guy, two Irish guys, one called Robert Grace and one called Ryan Mack. And both of those guys have had massive success on TikTok. Now,
Mm,
that is like a different demographic. That's taken like mainly targeting kind of teenagers and younger people. But the
oh,
output of that is just like so quick. They have to put out like something every day on TikTok, and
mhm,
like that doesn't work for Thousand Beasts. It just Thousand Beasts wouldn't work like that. It takes me too long to make the music, and I'm more focused on. Even though it's probably not the best way, I know you could probably like grow your audience much faster and bigger if you did it that way. But for me, it's for Thousand Beasts. It's about finding my niche, and like this is my genre, and like I say to people, like if it's not for you, it's not for you. That's fine. Like
yeah,
there's in Ireland, there's 5 million people. In Europe, there's whatever 450 million people. Like I can guarantee you, without ever introducing my music to any of those 450 million people, I can guarantee you there's a million people will like it.
yeah,
I just have to find them and give it to them,
mhm,
and that means 44 million mightn't like it, but that doesn't matter. That really doesn't matter.
yeah. That's
We
a
have a
really
big
good point.
because we have
Yeah,
a big intention, like, and it annoys me a lot because a lot of people are like, "Oh, you could like get massive numbers and stuff." I'm like, "Yeah, you could get massive numbers, but what are you trying to do? Are you just trying to be popular, or are you trying to make art? And
yeah,
there's a difference between like being successful doing something you want to do and being successful doing something that like doesn't suit you.
yeah,
And yeah, I know from working as a producer for other people that there's a lot of people like trying to play this TikTok game thing, and
yeah,
they're very miserable because they spend a lot of time inside on their own, spending all day making TikToks, and then they get very
yeah.
stressed about it, and yeah, I don't know, it doesn't feel very healthy. So
Now, Tony Robbins says success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. So he's like, there are a lot
yeah,
of successful people out there, but they drive the Ferrari, Maserati, and live in like LA and they're fancy, whatever. But if you don't feel fulfilled at the end of the day, that's why they take drugs. That's why they fall into that alcohol. Like this, we could talk hours just on this topic, but it's because they don't feel fulfilled. They thought that what they were going after would make them happy and all that, but that's you don't feel fulfilled at the end of the day. And I think that's a really good point that you brought up, because you can spend so much time on like the likes and the comments and all that stuff and trying to keep up, but really like the thing is when you really niche down and you know your audience and you focus on your audience, you don't need to fill an arena to make decent money. Like I've interviewed people like Chris Bradley on here, and she's making six figures as a producer, and she's in no way a household name, and she's worked with like Warner Brothers and like big companies. And because she niched down, like you don't need to reach those millions of people. You do not need, like it says, if you have 100 super fans, like die-hard super fans that will buy anything you put out, basically, you can quit your day job just with
yeah, it's
100.
that's it. It really is, and that's kind of the big decision that I made with my own project with Thousand Beasts.
Yeah,
Whatever 18 months ago, it was like, okay, because let's stop chasing after like doing everything everybody said you should do, and just actually make the music you want to make, and
yeah,
you'll figure it out. And it's like it takes time for now. I get a lot of young artists coming to me looking for me to produce stuff for them and stuff,
yeah,
and it takes time for people to figure out what it is they want to do. It definitely took me time to figure out what
yeah,
1000 Beasts was going to be and what the others. But again, just like get it going and you'll figure it out.
yeah.
Like nothing is ever perfect. You can adjust it after. But yeah, I totally agree. There's a handful of people in the world will like make a handful of people turn into the Rihannas or the Billie Eilishes or whatever.
Yep.
But that is not for everybody. But there is
Yeah.
definitely plenty of space for niches. Like there's so
Mhm.
many niches, particularly with the internet.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much room, and I think there's there's no need to be in that starving artist mentality anymore. Like there's room. It's usually because we don't know how to market, or we don't know how to niche down, or we don't know how to like communicate the value of our music to other people. And we're more of a me and take mentality rather of a service based mentality. Be like, okay, how can I help? How can I serve with my music or production or stuff like that? When you go out there and you change their mentality, it's like, how can I serve this person? How can I help this producer? How can I give rather than how can I take? What can I take? Then it just shifts the entire thing. Like that's what the entire podcast is based on, and it's doing really well, way better than I thought it would. But it's because I changed the mind shift to, okay, instead of what can I take, what can I give? What do musicians need? Or producers need, and how can I help that? And so yeah, that's what you've been doing with 1000 Beasts, and that was like the main thing that made me want to reach out, because I'm like, nice, we need more people like you that is just like being out there and just like just doing it, just do it, stop, you know.
It's hard though. It is very, and like you do spend a lot of time. Doubting yourself is the wrong thing. I don't doubt myself, but it's there's things you want to do. Like it's again,
Yeah,
it's like being. You want to be, and I agree with everything you said there. But you got to serve people. But at the same time, Thousand Beasts for me is art. Like it is at the end of the day, it's not entertainment, it's art, and like there is a critical
yeah.
difference between the two. And I feel in entertainment, it's very focused towards serving. And if you want to be, there's a lot of people I've met, and they want to be really successful entertainers. They just,
Mhm.
but they call themselves artists,
Yeah,
and they'd be much better off if they thought of themselves as entertainers, and they could probably be more successful if they thought of themselves as entertainers.
yeah,
Being an artist is much harder because you have to try and, I mean, convince people that your art is worth something to them, and there's a million ways. I'm sure you have way better ideas of how to do that than I do, but you like, I will create stuff and then I will have music ready to go, and it'll be now how the hell am I gonna, what do I do now? Like, you know, when it comes to like artwork and all sorts of stuff, and
yeah,
like, right, I need to like figure, and it's very hard when it's you as an, like, I find it quite hard when it's just me as an individual. I mean, I'm
yeah.
sure from the outside looking in, there's probably a very like clear, this is what 1000 Beasts is. But to
Mhm.
me, because it's me, it's so personal, I haven't a clue. I find that hardest part of all, like, especially if you're trying to like brand yourself, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
the
it's
scary,
hard.
such an awful word, brand yourself, but like, so I
Yeah,
just try not to think about it, and just I have this rule of like, just don't be cringe, don't do anything like cheesy, just be honest and it'll be fine, like,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah, no, I feel that I think I've like rebranded the podcast so many times and like changed the direction, kind of always like tweaking it a little bit, like, okay, I'm almost there, like always kind of like, okay, what is the podcast really about? Like so like that, and I'm still, you know, figuring it out. I think we
Yeah,
all
but you'll
are.
never be there. Like, it's you never get there. It's always the journey. It's the journey. Like, you got. That's why you've got to enjoy the journey, and that's why the young people that are miserable doing TikToks aren't happy, because it's you don't. It's not like we're kind of told like you get there and then you're success and it's the
Yeah.
golden gate to heaven. It doesn't really work like that. You just got to enjoy the process.
Mhm.
Like, I love sitting. Like, I have a rule at the moment where I kind of sit down at least one, because I'm busy doing freelance work and
Yeah.
like lots of other things and like promoting this album and stuff.
Mhm.
And I have a rule that like I'll sit down at least one day this week, one day a week, and produce something new, like produce another beat or another vibe, another instrumental, or like something that can go into the catalog that I can send out to more artists in the future when I want to
Yeah.
collaborate them. Because
Yeah.
I like, I'm halfway through the release of the first album, so
Mhm.
I'm getting the second album in place at the moment, and like, I just love it. I love sitting down for 3 or 4 hours and just like, you know, traipsing through all sorts of things and like finding ideas. And when I sit down and do it, it happens really quick, and that's great. It's the, yeah, so I think that's, you have to enjoy that. If you don't enjoy that process, then what's the point?
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you. Nothing to add there.
Yeah,
I had a one question that because you did the first of all, congrats on like doing the Dublin New Year's Festival like twice in a row. That's
yeah,
a big deal. And when I kind of watched the trailer that you put out, or on the, what is the second account called?
I just call it produced by Cian.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah,
So I saw like the snippet and I'm like, holy cow, like that is such a big deal. For like, there were two questions. I'm like, is there at any point where you kind of freak out and you're like, this is too big, like how am I gonna handle this? Or is it like, oh, challenge accepted kind of thing?
that gig might look like it was massive, but it really wasn't. I didn't do it. Like, to me, that wasn't hard. There was a massive team involved in that, because there's obviously like the fireworks team and yada yada yada. But
Yeah,
like, there was a guy called there's a famous band from Ireland called the Saw Doctors,
yeah,
and the old drummer from the Saw Doctors. These are a really famous band from Ireland. The drummer runs a production company called Arcana, and they do that Dublin New Year's festival, and that goes out on television in Ireland
yeah,
every New Year's Eve. And he just reached out to me to do basically the production, the music production for it. So it's great. I just went up to Dublin with him. I went up to, it was in a hotel room actually. I met him in a hotel, and
yeah,
he had a hotel room. So I just brought up the laptop and we sat down for 3 or 4 hours, and I was kind of like, what are you looking for? And he was like, this is what I'm looking for. And I was like, sweet. And I just started like pulling stuff together. And like, I find it very easy
yeah,
I think communication is essential when it comes to music production, if you're working as a freelancer.
yeah. Especially if
Because
there's so many people involved in the project, I think it gets even harder.
yeah, you just have to be able to communicate really well, and you
Yeah,
have to be confident that like I say to lots of people, like, I'm going to throw 20 ideas at you, and 19 of them are going to be terrible, and tell me the ones you don't like. Don't worry about offending me, because
yeah,
I have no emotional attachment to these things. Like, we will get there much quicker if you tell me what you do and don't like.
yeah,
I'm not going to take it personally. I won't be offended.
yeah.
It's just I need to figure out what it is you want so I can give that to you. Um, that's the way I view these projects. That type of thing doesn't scare me. No, not at all. Um, the scariest thing I ever did was my first gig. My first gig was my first big like piano gig as a session pianist. It was with a group called the Celtic Tenors, who
Yeah.
were signed to Sony in Germany and maybe Virgin out of Australia or something. They were doing a Canadian tour, and I knew their regular pianist, their main musical director, and he got sick about 5 days before they were just about to do a North American tour.
Oh no.
And I just got the call, and I flew to Vancouver like 3 or 4 days later, and the first show was that night, and I'd never played with them before. Yeah, that
So
was
no
nerve.
band rehearsals, like nothing.
No, just some stuff that some in the sound check.
Holy cow, talk about stressful situation,
It wasn't though. You learn. I've heard of pianists do this, and like really famous old school pianists, people like Glenn Gould and stuff, who did this in the past, where they could practice in their head. And I had never done that. I didn't understand that concept when I was in college. But when I was there, I had to figure out, because I didn't have time in front of a piano. Like, I had 11 hours in a plane or whatever. So I was like, okay, how am I going to practice? So I'd like look at the music and just visualize. I was like, what'll I do here? This is what I'll do there. This is what I'll do. And again, just systemize it, break it down. Like,
Yeah.
that's my, I don't know, my inner autistic or whatever it is, kind of just breaking it down and being like, this is what I'm going to do.
Wow.
But yeah, it's fine. I think loads of people, that's not the end of the world. It's just look, at the end of the day, it's just a gig.
Yeah, but I still, I mean, that's like a high pressure, like stress kind of situation to like put yourself, your body, your mind into, be like, oh, no biggie. Like, there are only, I don't know how many people watching.
Yeah, it was in a theater, so there's probably about 1,000 people that night. But like, when you're doing like, but like when you're playing it, like, theater gigs are funny because the lights go on and that's it. And like, sorry, when the lights go on, you can't see anything, so you're just on your own.
Yeah.
You may as well be playing to no one then. The only time you think of the lights is when the show's over, the lights come on and everybody stands up at the end. You're like, oh, there's people there the whole time, you know?
Is there a skill that if you went to bed tonight and you woke up the next morning, that you could do perfectly, like without, you just woke up and you could perfectly do this skill, what would it be?
God, there's so many.
Yeah, it's it can be really anything that's related to music.
It would be interpersonal for a start, absolutely. Like, without a shadow of doubt. I would say communication, but I would probably say digital communication. I feel like I'm very good at communicating in the old school way, like talking to people, meeting people. Probably online networking, or like online branding, or maybe actually in-person networking. Sometimes you can be intimidated when you don't know sometimes like, I don't know someone and I might want to work with them, and you can just be really intimidated and be like, oh, I don't want to message them. Oh, what if they don't say?
Yep.
I should message
That's
them.
how I feel every day when I'm like messaging people, like musicians for the podcast. I'm
But you do it,
terrified
though.
every time.
You do message them, and that's essential. And I think sometimes I think I should probably just chance my arm more. I've a great friend here in Cork. He's a songwriter, and he's brilliant. He's a brilliant songwriter, and he's based in London now, and he's working with loads of really talented people. But he's from West Cork, and West Cork is not too far from here, but it's kind of the countryside. And people from West Cork are known as chancers. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you know what a chancer is, but it's like just someone who totally takes a chance on it. They try their arm at everything, and
Yeah.
he will just message like it doesn't matter if it's Lewis Capaldi. He'll just like slide into the DMs and be like, "Hey man, how's it going? Want to do a session?" Like it does not matter, and he's so
Yeah.
good at it. And he will. I don't know how he does it. It's just brazen, and there's nothing to stop anybody from doing that. I don't know. It just seems to work for him. I never knew him. I was making music and releasing music, and he
Yeah.
wanted to become a songwriter, and he just messaged me. And without sounding too arrogant, like I do get messages every now and again into the DMs of people
Right.
being like, "Oh, I'd love to work with you," whatever. And a lot of the time they're terrible, or they might have no background, and like it would be there's I couldn't go through them all, like it's a waste of time. But
Yeah.
for some reason, Bill's message to me stood out, and I just met him for a cup of tea. I don't know why, and that was that. I was became good friends with him. Yeah, he'd no background or anything, but I don't know what he even said. But I just had one look at him. I was like, "Yeah, I'll meet you for a cup of tea. Absolutely no worries." And
Nice.
the rest is history. Yeah.
It's I don't know why it is always so terrifying, but once you do it, I would like to say it gets easier, but it doesn't. At least for me, it doesn't feel that way. Like every time, that's why I just do voice recordings most of the time, because I'm like, okay, I can just talk for a minute. I can do that rather than like message forever. Like I don't know. I feel a voice memo also feels more personal, but that's
It does. It definitely a voice memo is. It does. I feel like the problem with voice memos is sometimes it can be hard to listen to them because you might be in the middle of something. But
yeah.
a voice memo because text is a terrible method of communication.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. But for my last question, because I know I keep want to honor your time. But for my last question that I like to ask everyone in closing is, what makes a good song for you?
Man, what a question. So I'm actually not much of a lyric guy. Amazingly, I know almost like 90% of people listen to music for the lyrics. I
Yeah,
don't. I
I do. I'm a lyric person.
Yeah,
I
I listen
admit.
to it for and I have written a lot of songs in the past, and I actually don't really enjoy the lyric. The lyric writing process is the only part of songwriting that I don't like doing. I can do it, and when I do it, I feel like I'm not bad at it, but it takes a lot of energy for me to do it or something. I find it's very exhausting. Whereas music, I really enjoy making the music. I just love making the music. So a song that's interesting to me is something that is has just a unique timbre and stands out on its own. Normally, it has something interesting. It actually, I know exactly what it is. I'm interested in music that I don't understand.
Ooh, wow.
It's always something that I don't understand. So if I like something, it's because I don't understand it normally. So I've obsession with a few bands. Like I love Kruangbin. I don't. Their guitarist is a genius. I don't know if you know them. There's the three piece from Austin, Texas. They make like, or they're from Houston. Apologies, but they make kind of very stripped, chill kind of music with just a
Mm,
bass guitar and drums, and the guitarist can just pick up these beautiful melodies and voicings, and it's just all incredibly done, and the mix is stunning, and I don't understand how they make it that good. Another band I love are Men I Trust,
yeah,
and Men I Trust do nothing complicated. Like they're so refined and tasty, and they just use beautiful, simple textural elements, and like they have a lovely female vocal. It's just gorgeous. And then there's other things that I'm like, how do they do that, or what is that, or I've never heard. I loved Flume when I was younger because I think I didn't understand how to make music like Flume. So I was like,
yeah.
how do you make that type of music? So I think I love music I don't understand. Rhythm is really important though, as well. Like I obviously love stuff that has like a great feel to it,
Yeah,
and something that's like, if something has an interesting chord progression, again, I'll be drawn to it because I'll be like, oh, what's that? Like 90% of songs use the same like three or four chords.
yep.
And because I'm so used to playing music, I can,
Mhm.
like, people are like, oh, how can you figure it out so quickly? I'm like, because it's the same chords used over and over
It's the
again.
same.
It's the
It's the
same.
same one. Yeah,
So when I hear something like that, it bores me, being honest. I find that
yeah,
quite boring. And if there's something interesting there, I'm like, oh,
yeah,
oh.
yeah,
So the big thing the big thing that was interesting to me for the past couple of months was like when you take a chord but you play a different bass note underneath it. So like if you're in the key of like C, you put a
yeah,
D in the bass over a C major. So you just
yeah,
like something like that, and you can and you can just go mad with that. You can do crazy by doing that. You can open up. I mean, they're technically like you're talking about 11s and kind of sus
yeah, yeah,
chords.
yeah. Oh, I love major sevenths. That's like, I don't know. Ever since I got introduced to a major seven chord, I'm just like, oh yes. I don't know.
Now,
It's
the
just
next
like,
time you play a C major 7, just put a D under the bass, and then
yeah.
you're kind of away with the high, and then you kind of get these mad. Yeah, so that's what music I like. Yeah, I think that's a good thing of what makes a good song for me. Stuff that I'm like, oh, I don't understand that. That's unbelievable.
I love it's so interesting because I almost always ask this question at the end, and it's always a different answer, and I love it. It's so good. So for people that want to check you out, that want to know where to find your stuff, your music, your projects, go hit us with all the
So
goods.
1000 beasts is my output, so that's just 1000 beasts, and you can. It's just at 1000 beasts, be it on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, or Spotify. You can get it there too. I maintain my Instagram. I don't really keep up my. I'm terrible at maintaining my Twitter and Facebook, but yeah, and that's where you can listen to the 1000 beast stuff. It's kind of, how would I describe it, as kind of like soultronic-y, kind of like down tempo soultronic-y kind of stuff, a little bit of like indie, alt electronica, R&B-ish. I suppose there's a few tags and genres in there. And if anybody wants to get in touch with me about music production or like
Yes.
playing music for them or piano or anything like that, I have another page which is called Produced by Cian, and that's basically just for all my freelance work, and that's the day job, as they say. So I split between the two. That's me.
Yeah. So when's the album coming out? So you said like March next year?
Yeah, the album, yeah, it'll probably be the first week of April next year.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, but you'll always, like we just talked about, you'll always bring out music consistently. So there's always.
Yeah, I have plans for what I'll do next. I'm gonna do I won't say who, but I have plans for an EP, a collaboration EP with someone that will drop maybe this time next year or something, like straight after the album. And
Yeah.
while I'm doing that, like over the next 8 or 9 months, I'll probably work on the second album. So once that EP is out, once the album is out, and then the collaboration EP, then I'll drop the second album in 2020. When's that? 23? Jeez, that's a long time away. So yeah. But I
Well,
want to
it
get some
always happens
gigs.
faster than you think.
Yeah, the gigs is what I want to do now. I want to get the live show up and running and get some gigs on the go. So that's the aim.
Yes. Yeah. But there aren't any lined up right now.
No, we can't do gigging here in Ireland yet. We're only kind of just coming back and stuff.
Same. It takes forever until we finally get to do stuff. But anyways, yeah. So everything is 1000 beasts. I always thought it was beats, but it's beasts.
Everybody thinks it's beasts. Yeah, no, it's beasts. BEAS.
Yeah. No. So beasts.
Beauty and the Beasts. Yeah.
Yeah, and the beasts. Exactly. There you go. So everything will be linked up below, so everyone will be able to find you. I had no trouble finding your stuff. It's very easy. As soon as you put in 1000 and then a B, it usually pops up. So
Woo, that's great.
so that's good. So yeah, thank you for being on here. I really appreciate your time, and I just want to acknowledge you for doing such good work and putting
Thank
out
you.
great music. And yeah, I'm just a fan. Otherwise, I wouldn't have you on. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And do keep in touch. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for listening to the Musician Secrets podcast. I appreciate your time because you could literally be doing a bazillion other things right now, but you're here with me, so thank you. If you want, you can scroll all the way to the bottom and leave a comment on how you're liking the podcast, what you've learned, and things you've even implemented that have helped you out. As a little thank you, I put together a free members area with all my best resources, books, podcasts, and online courses about everything you need to know as an independent musician, from producing to songwriting to marketing to building a home studio, all the good stuff. All you have to do is either click the link below or go to alisekoa.com/free. I'll see you on the other side. Bye!